Good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you might be. My name is Kevin Michael Grace, and this is the KMG Show. So, it turns out there is more than one news story in the world besides COVID-19. And the other story is the falling apart of the disintegration, if you will, of the Obama plot against Donald Trump. From the Daily Mail, Michael Flynn's attorney claims Obama was in on FBI plot to frame him in Russia probe, as Vice President Pence says he would welcome the former national security advisor back into the Trump administration. The lawyer for Flynn, Sidney Powell, took over from the high-powered firm that Flynn had that was doing a terrible job, and thought that it would be a good idea for him to plead guilty. And they were replaced. Was Covington and Burlington? Something like that. Sidney Powell took over, and then he started getting some serious lawyering. Flynn was charged with lying to FBI investigators about his contact with the Russian ambassador under special counsel Robert Mueller's investigation in 2017. He initially pleaded guilty, but withdrew the plea in January. The Justice Department announced that it was dropping the charges last week as Flynn's legal team called the FBI's tactics into question. These agents specifically schemed and planned with each other how to not tip him off that he was even the person being investigated, his attorney Sidney Powell told Fox News on Sunday. They kept him relaxed and unguarded deliberately as part of their effort to set him up and frame him. Powell pointed to recently released testimony about an Oval Office meeting then President Obama held with officials weeks before Flynn's interview. During the meeting, Obama allegedly revealed that he knew about Flynn's phone call with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak, which apparently came as a surprise to the then Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates. After the meeting, Obama asked to speak with Yates and then FBI Director James Comey privately. The president specified that he did not want any additional information on the matter, but was seeking information on whether the White House should be treating Flynn any differently given the information according to the testimony. The whole thing was orchestrated and set up within the FBI. Former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, former CIA Director John Brennan, and in the Oval Office meeting that day with President Obama, Powell said. Asked if she believes that Flynn was the victim of a plot that went all the way up to Obama, Powell stated, absolutely. The attorney's statements came as Vice President Pence said he would welcome Flynn's return to the Trump administration. For my part, I'd be happy to see Michael Flynn again, Pence said. So, from the New York Post, a U.S. attorney's review into the origins of the Russia investigation is going full throttle and adding top prosecutors who are breaking down individual aspects of the case, including the prosecution of former White House National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, according to a report on Monday. Jeff Jensen, the U.S. attorney for the Eastern District of Missouri, who reviewed the Flynn case for the Justice Department, and interim U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia, Timothy Shea, are assisting the probe being head up by U.S. Attorney for Connecticut, John Durham. They farmed the investigation out because it is too much for Durham and he didn't want to be distracted, Fox News reported. He's going full throttle and they're looking at everything. Attorney General William Barr was asked last week whether he thought the FBI under then Director James Comey conspired against Flynn. I think, that's a question that really has to wait for an analysis of all the different episodes that occurred through the summer of 2016 and the first several months of President Trump's administration, Barr told CBS News. Barr also said Durham was looking at events before and after Trump's election. The Fox News report said Durham is looking into whether the FBI misrepresented its visa application to obtain warrants to monitor former Trump campaign associate Carter Page. Barr talks to Durham every day, a source told Fox News. The president has been briefed that the case is being pursued and it's serious. Transcripts of interviews from the House Intelligence Committee's Russia investigation revealed that top officials in the Obama administration acknowledged that they knew of no, quote, empirical evidence, unquote, of a conspiracy between the Trump campaign and Russian officials. You know, my own view is that Obama and the rest of the swamp would have got away with this, except that the DOJ, the FBI, the CIA, and the whole of the so-called intelligence community decided that they were simply not going to put up with Trump winning the election. And therefore, there had to be mounted a coup d'etat to remove him from office. Story from the Federalist today by Margot Cleveland. Why did Obama tell the FBI to hide its activities from the Trump administration? It begins in 1980, a teenage Amy Carter left a burnt cake in the oven of the White House's family quarters in a reflex of childish revenge for her father's landslide loss to Ronald Reagan. In 2017, Barack Obama and Joe Biden avenged Donald Trump's surprise victory over Hillary Clinton by leaving what they claim was a Russian agent in the West Wing. That conclusion inevitably follows if one accepts as credible the FBI's supposed predicates for launching the Crossfire Hurricane investigation into the Trump campaign and the 4 related probes into George Papadopoulos, Carter Page, Paul Manafort, and Michael Flynn. You know, I'm reminded that on 30 Rock, Jack came up with some clever scheme that rather fell apart before it became successful again. And he named it Operation Righteous Cowboy Lightning. And then later, when he used that name, everyone thought that it was ridiculous and they wouldn't listen to him. Crossfire Hurricane, which was the investigation of the Trump campaign, it comes from 2 words in the Rolling Stones song, Jumping Jack Flash. I was born in a crossfire hurricane, sang Mick Jagger. Pretty clever, they thought themselves, wouldn't you say? On July 31st, 2016, the FBI opened the Crossfire Hurricane counterintelligence investigation of the Trump campaign, purportedly to learn if members of the Trump team were coordinating or cooperating with the Russian government to influence or interfere with the 2016 elections. By August 16th, the FBI had opened 4 subsidiary investigations on individuals connected to the campaign, claiming their connections to Russian businesses, pro-Russian factions, or Russian-owned entities reasonably indicated they, quote, may wittingly or unwittingly be involved in activity on behalf of the Russian Federation, which may constitute a federal crime or threat to national security. The FBI maintained that it opened Crossfire Hurricane rather than providing Trump a defensive briefing on the report from a friendly foreign government that Russia had reached out to a member of his campaign to release damaging information on Hillary Clinton, because agents had no indication as to which person in the Trump campaign allegedly received the offer from the Russians. So in other words, we don't know. So we'll just investigate everybody. We'll just surveil everybody. We'll just wiretap everybody. According to Counterintelligence Division Assistant Director Bill Priestap, had we provided a defensive briefing to someone on the Trump campaign, we would have alerted the campaign to what we were looking into. And if someone on the campaign was engaged with the Russians, she would very likely change her tactics and or otherwise seek to cover up her activities, thereby preventing us from finding the truth. Former Deputy Director of the FBI, Andy McCabe, likewise told Inspector General Michael Horowitz that he did not consider a defensive briefing as an alternative to opening a counterintelligence case, because based on the friendly foreign government information, the FBI did not know if any member of the campaign was coordinating with Russia, and that the FBI did not brief people who could potentially be the subjects you were investigating or looking for. So in other words, this is a classic fishing expedition. And of course, where does this story, this legend that Trump was coordinating with the Russians, that he was a puppet of Putin? Well, it comes from Christopher Steele and his famous Steele or Piss dossier, which, as we know, was paid for by Hillary Clinton. Yeah, no conflict of interest there. Certainly not. On July the 5th, 2017, There was a meeting in the Oval Office with Sally Yates, James Comey, John Brennan, and James Clapper, and they briefed Obama, Joe Biden, and National Security Advisor Susan Rice on Russia-related issues. Rice later wrote an email to herself on January 20th, 2017, Trump's inauguration day and her last day in the White House, purporting to summarize that meeting. Quote, on January 5th, following a briefing by IC leadership on Russian hacking during the 2016 presidential election, Rice wrote, Obama had a brief follow-on conversation with Comey and Yates in the Oval Office. Vice President Biden and I were also present. According to Rice, President Obama began the conversation by stressing his continued commitment to ensuring that every aspect of this issue is handled by the intelligence and law enforcement communities by the book. But then she added a significant caveat to that commitment, quote, from a national security perspective, however, President Obama said he wants to be sure that as we engage with the incoming team, we are mindful to ascertain if there is any reason that we cannot share information fully as it relates to Russia. And this is a classic cover your ass memorandum. When Comey found it important to tell the incoming commander-in-chief of the ridiculous P-tape intel following Obama's guidance, the then FBI director did not tell Trump that the FBI had an active investigation into Trump's incoming national security advisor, predicated on the idea that Flynn was potentially a Russian agent. Even after Obama had left office and Comey had a new commander-in-chief to report to, Comey continued to follow Obama's prompt by withholding intel from Trump. Recently released documents included as exhibits to the Department of Justice motion to dismiss the criminal charges against Flynn reveal this reality. Following Trump's inauguration, Comey remained adamant that Trump not be briefed on the details of Flynn's call with the Russian ambassador, and then, quote, broke every protocol, unquote, to preempt Yates' directive that he informed the White House of the conversation by sending agents to interview Flynn in the West Wing January 24th, 2017. The FBI's targeting of Page included the use of 4 constitutionally defective Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act surveillance warrants. The recent declassification of additional aspects of the 4 visa applications exposes that the FBI believed Page continued to communicate with higher-ups in the Trump administration. The renewal applications added that the FBI further assesses that Page is attempting to downplay his contacts with the Russian government and to dispel the controversy surrounding him, so as to make him more viable as a foreign policy expert. Yet the FBI did not brief Trump on its supposed belief that Russia sought to use Page's connection with administration officials to influence America's foreign policy. It's kind of curious, don't you think? That if the FBI sincerely believed that Carter Page was or could be a Russian agent, you would think that they'd want to warn Trump about this. Cleveland continues, so not only was the FBI content with leaving the supposed Russian agent in the West Wing, it had no qualms about allowing another purported Russian agent to communicate with senior U.S. government officials with the goal of influencing the Trump administration's foreign policy. The FBI, however, is not solely to blame for keeping this important information from Trump. They were only following the counsel of former President Barack Obama. While the young Amy Carter can be forgiven for her juvenile vision of departing the White House, content with the picture of Nancy Reagan struggling to clean out the oven, there is no excuse for an outgoing president to withhold intel on supposed Russian agents from the president-elect. And there is no excuse for an outgoing president to advise holdover high-ranking officials to do likewise once the new president has taken office. Or rather, the only excuse is an equally scandalous one. Obama knew the Trump investigation was a hoax from the get-go. I suppose, if Trump had known then what he knows now, he would have sacked all of them right from the very beginning. The head of the FBI, the head of the DOJ, all of the relevant top officials simply would have been sacked. An interesting story from the New York Post: Obama's top brass contradict public statements about collusion under oath. So these various swamp creatures made statements publicly, typically on CNN, Oh, and they leaked stuff to the Washington Post and the New York Times, and apparently it was a slam dunk. Trump was a Russian puppet. However, under oath, they told a different story. Former Director of National Intelligence James Clapper, who has emerged as a staunch Trump critic and paid CNN contributor since leaving his government role, told the committee during a July 2017 interview that he, quote, never saw any direct empirical evidence that the Trump campaign or someone in it was plotting or conspiring with the Russians to meddle with the election. That's not to say there weren't concerns about the evidence we were seeing, anecdotal evidence, and then something is redacted. But I do not recall any instance when I had direct evidence of the content of these meetings. It's just the frequency and prevalence of them that was of concern. Just 2 months prior to his sworn testimony, Clapper said on NBC's Meet the Press that his, quote, dashboard warning light was clearly on, unquote, regarding potential communications between the Russians and White House senior advisor Jared Kushner. 1 month later, Clapper stated that the Russian investigation had surpassed that of Watergate, referencing the break-in at the Democratic National Committee headquarters in 1972 that led to the resignation of former President Nixon. In December of 2017, Clapper said on CNN that Vladimir Putin is a great case officer, continuing he knows how to handle an asset, and that's what he's doing with the president. As recently as 2019, Clapper said it was a possibility that Trump was a Russian asset, whether witting or unwitting. Andrew McCabe, a former deputy director of the FBI and a current CNN contributor, are you seeing a pattern emerging here? Became a very public foe of the president after he was fired in March 2018. In an interview with 60 Minutes in February 2019, McCabe recalled a meeting with President Trump in the early days of his administration saying, quote, I was speaking to the man who had just run for the presidency and won the election for the presidency, and who might have done so with the aid of the government of Russia, our most formidable adversary on the world stage. And that was something that troubled me greatly, unquote. I'm just kind of curious, you know, when someone like Clapper appears on 60 Minutes and says that Russia is America's most formidable adversary on the world stage, Scott Pelley or whoever doesn't say, oh, you meant to say China, right? No, Russia. Come on. Seriously? Russia? Not China? Prior to his days as a cable news pundit, however, the FBI official told the House Intelligence Committee that investigators had not been able to verify claims made in the Steele dossier. He said, we have not been able to prove the accuracy of all the information. Pressed further to confirm that he did not know if Christopher Steele's dossier was true, McCabe said, that's correct. Ben Rhodes, who's the former Deputy National Security Advisor, he tweeted in July 2019 after Mueller's public testimony to Congress, quote, Russia attacked our democracy. Trump campaign sought its help, had many contacts with Russians, lied about it, and obstructed the investigation into it. Several senior Trump associates were convicted of crimes. Trump would have been indicted if he wasn't president. Not complicated, unquote. But when asked under oath by House investigators if he had any evidence of coordination between the Trump campaign and Russia, Rhodes said he did not. Quote, I wouldn't have received any information on any criminal counterintelligence investigations into what the Trump campaign was doing, so I would not have seen that information. I saw indications of potential coordination, but I did not see, the specific evidence of the actions of the Trump campaign, unquote. Samantha Power, the baleful Irish banshee, who was former U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, has publicly accused Trump of catering to Putin to compensate him for interfering in the 2016 election. She wrote on Twitter in November of last year, quote, every day Donald Trump finds new ways to compensate Vladimir Putin for his election interference, and every day Putin gains additional incentive to interfere again on Trump's behalf in 2020, unquote. But speaking to House investigators and asked whether she had seen evidence of Russian interference, she said, quote, I am not in possession of anything. I'm not in possession and didn't read or absorb information that came from out of the intelligence community. Susan Rice, another member of Obama's Faster Pussycat Kill squad, told ABC's This Week in July 2018 that questioning if President Trump was compromised by the Russians was legitimate because Putin was benefiting. Quote, what his motivations are, I think, is a legitimate question. The policies that this president has pursued globally have served Vladimir Putin's interest. Less than a year earlier, however, Rice told House investigators that she hadn't seen evidence proving then-candidate Trump coordinated or colluded with Russia to take the 2016 election. I don't recall intelligence that I would consider evidence to that effect that I saw prior to my departure, she said. So I guess lying to the American people through CNN, NBC, whatever, is not a crime. However, lying to Congress under oath is a crime, although John Brennan certainly got away with it. Now, apparently, CNN doesn't care about its contributors who are compensated for their supposed expertise and knowledge lying to the American people. But I suppose the American people will have to take that up with the media. Is there anything that these people say that can be taken at face value, by which I mean the media and the swamp creatures who infest it? Well, this is from Fox News. NBC News' Chuck Todd aired a deceptively edited clip of Attorney General Bill Barr discussing the Michael Flynn case during his Meet the Press broadcast on Sunday, prompting the network to concede the mistake hours later, but there's still no word on whether Todd will apologize on air. Asked by CBS News' Catherine Herridge how history would judge the DOJ's decision to move to dismiss the Flynn case, Barr initially responded laughing, well, history is written by the winners, so it largely depends on who's writing the history. After the brief clip aired, Todd remarked that he was struck by the cynicism of the answer. It's a correct answer, but he's the Attorney General. He didn't make the case that he was upholding the rule of law. He was almost admitting that, yeah, this was a political job. In the full clip, which the NBC show did not air, Barr immediately went on to state explicitly that, in fact, he felt the decision upheld the rule of law. Quote, I think a fair history would say it was a good decision because it upheld the rule of law. It upheld the standards of the Department of Justice, and it undid what was an injustice. Donald Trump yesterday tweeted on this, sleepy eyes Chuck Todd should be fired by Comcast, NBC, for this fraud. He knew exactly what he was doing. Public airwaves equal fake news. But the show did not say it would apologize on air. NBC News did not respond to Fox News' request for information about the on-air apology. Separately, CBS News' 60 Minutes also aired a deceptively edited clip falsely implying the Secretary of State, Mike Pompeo, had said the coronavirus was man-made. The State Department called the edit a deliberate effort to mislead. Yeah. Okay. Oh, and CNN's Brian Stelter melts down. Call it a symptom of Trump deranged syndrome. CNN's Brian Stelter had a meltdown because he's upset about conservative media paying any attention to arguably the largest spy scandal in American history instead of breathlessly covering ongoing public health pandemic, which center-right outlets are still doing. Quote, the death toll isn't something that can just be downplayed. It's not something we can hide from, even if it's gut-wrenching to hear about every day. It's like New Orleans floods every day. It's like the planes going to the towers every day. And to look away and act like it's now normal or acceptable is a disgrace to the victims. It's so disappointing to look at what we're seeing from right-wing media these days when there's such an obsession with the deep state and these revelations with the Russia probe and the decision about Michael Flynn. Yeah. I'm just going to do a little, I'm just going to bring up the calculator here. Okay. So 2800000, so that's 2.8 million divided by 365 equals 7,671. That's the number of people who typically die every day in the United States of America. Again, I'll go back to my hypothesis that there seem to be very few people who can understand numbers above 1,000, and Brian Stelter appears to be one of them. Clearly, Stelter doesn't see the irony in his own comments after hyping up stories of Russian collusion with fake intelligence that a more than 2-year special counsel investigation with unlimited resources, they spent $40 million, found to be nothing more than an attempt at a deep state coup. The Mueller report, released last spring, only began to reveal the degree to which the media led the American people astray in believing their president was a Russian agent. After finding not one person on the Trump campaign, let alone Trump himself, working on behalf of the Russian government to subvert American interests, a damning Inspector General report released last fall details 17 major omissions in FISA warrant applications to spy on U.S. citizens, and a treasure trove of earth-shattering new evidence in recent weeks have completely exonerated former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn. In Stelter's world, however, it's nearly unforgivable to give any coverage to a scandal where his own network played entirely complicit. No serious person, as Stelter claims, is downplaying the massive death tolls that the novel Wuhan coronavirus has imposed on the world, which has in turn abruptly upended life as we knew it. Yes, it's all Trump's fault. It's the Trump virus and the Trump depression. That's certainly what they're saying on Twitter. Yes, what did Brian Stelter tweet on April the 18th? Last night I hit a wall, gutted by the death toll, disturbed by the government's shortcomings, dismayed by political rhetoric that bears no resemblance to reality, worried about friends who are losing jobs, kids who are missing school, and senior citizens who are living in fear. This is the lockdown. This is the lockdown which Trump is against, and Brian Stelter and CNN is in favor of. It's the friends who are losing jobs. No, their jobs have been taken away from them by government because they have been deemed to be non-essential. The very idea that in peacetime, the government can say, oh, your job is non-essential, tens of millions of you, so yeah, you're not going to be able to work anymore. Your business goes out of business. I don't know. Let's see whether you can get a loan from the government. Yeah, we're giving most of the money to Wall Street, but never mind that. But Obama still has his supporters, a lot of supporters, and a lot of them are in the entertainment industry. The president tweeted today, because it was Obamagate and he and Sleepy Joe led the charge, the most corrupt administration in U.S. history. So Ava DuVernay, who I gather is a very big deal. Oh, no, she's the woman who had she made another 60s film, civil rights thing. And then she was put at the helm of a beloved children's book with an enormous budget, and it just stank out the joint. Ava DuVernay tweeted, "The bots are out with Obamagate on the same weekend that we hear President Obama publicly calling that clown a catastrophe. If this is the tactic, y'all need new tactics. Try free tests for all, regardless of symptoms, food for the hungry, unemployment strategy, nah, just bots." Okay, I don't understand. Excuse me, the reference to bots. I noticed this just the other day, that y'all is the black Twitter equivalent of QED. Barbara Streisand chimed in by echoing Obama's leaked audio statement. She said, "Barack Obama is right. The rule of law is under siege in our nation. William Barr behaves like Trump's personal cover-up lawyer rather than attorney general." It is classic left-wing projection. The rule of law was shredded by the Obama administration. Oh no, but it's Donald Trump who's the threat to it. Patricia Arquette, yeah, I once liked that woman, but that's always a mistake, you know. She said, "I have also been blocking hundreds of accounts using this hashtag," and I suppose that would be Obamagate. Actor Jeffrey Wright Said the Obamagate thing is just so effing stupid. Meanwhile, 80,000 plus Americans dead in the last 2 months from Trump admin incompetence, malevolence, and chaos. Yes, I suppose the next step is to claim that Trump conjured up the coronavirus at Fort Meade or some such place, and then unleash it on the American people to what? To crash the stock market? To crash the economy? To destroy society? This doesn't make any sense. Trevor Noah, who was allegedly a comedian, tweeted, "Is Obamagate about the time Barack Obama used a selfie stick in the White House? Oh, stop it. You're killing me." The other joke is that one day, oh yeah, here we go. Today we remember Obama's tan suit, the worst scandal in presidential history. Chris Maloney, who I also used to like, tweeted, "Help me, I'm running out of distractions and things to blame." This is in reference to Trump. George Takei, one of the most moving issues from Barack Obama's presidency, what do you miss most about the Obama years? And there is a picture of a young black fellow who appears to be, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years old. Obama is bent to the waist, and the black boy is touching his head. It's his hand on his head. I don't know what's so moving about that. Sandra Bernhardt tweeted her support. John Cusack, who has been completely out of his mind for quite a few years now. And so the celebrities are still on board. So let's have a look at the chat. See what's going. A lot of comments today. Wow. Wow, a couple of hundred. Window clapping. Yeah, I have 2.5 hours to wait for that. I've noticed that Sarah Silverman, she gets written up in the Daily Mail, 3 times a week? Because she keeps going onto her balcony and banging a frying pan with a pair of tongs. It just seems to be, why not pick up a spoon? It just seems to be an odd thing to do. But there are all these women who appear in the Daily Mail with great regularity. There's that woman, is her name Emily Ratajkowski or something? This would-be actress. She was in Gone Girl, where she played a young woman with fabulous breasts. And she regularly appears in the Daily Mail. Oh, look, I'm almost naked for the 537th time. I mean, it's fairly obvious that these people are paying the Daily Mail for this coverage, right? I mean, I suppose it would be news if Sarah Silverman decided, you know, this whole 7 p.m., we're all, bullied into banging on pots and pans. It's stupid and I'm not going to do it anymore. That would be news. No. Nice lighting, says Coachalango. I never know whether that's sincere or not. It's cloudy today. It was amazingly hot in Victoria over the weekend. It was reached 79 degrees on both Saturday and Sunday, and it is still quite warm, unpleasantly warm in my hotel room here. I had to turn the air conditioner off because it is exceedingly noisy. Mike F says, if Obama implicated, look for left to start street-level movement a la Occupy Wall Street based on Black Lives Matter or Antifa or something new. Chogokin 666 says, Joggers Rebellion. Yes, I'm going to be getting to the late lamented jogger soon enough. Bernard Brightson writes, concerning Obama, does Trump admin have any remedy or must Congress act? What about Obama admin people? Regular criminal indictment would suffice there. There was a pretty good joke made on Twitter. Sorry, I can't tell you who it was. Why was Obama taken away from his important Netflix business to decide that he wasn't going to release information on the Ukraine? John Miller, it'll be up to Durham and the DOJ. Well, I've already heard a number of complaints that this is just like QAnon. That QAnon was saying for what, the longest time. Oh, that Jeff Sessions is hunkered down there and he's going through this information, and Hollywood is going to be leveled. Hollywood is going to be destroyed, and salt is going to be strewn on the ashes. But that never happened, did it? Oh, Alex DeLarge says, today Trump called Aubrey a wonderful guy, LOL. Well, what else is he going to say? It's not really his jurisdiction, you know. He made a reference to his tuxedo the other day, which people were saying that he was trolling. I don't know. Okay, a whole bunch of retracted messages. Wonderful individual, fabulous lad, bright future ahead as a felon. Apparently he was a aspiring electrician. I'm not making this up. I'm not making this up. Alex Large says, KMG, will you discuss Trump's apparent coordination with the Israelis? Well, I'll need more than that. He's always made it clear that he's a friend of Israel. I mean, he recognized Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, which strikes me as being entirely sensible because it is the capital, and it's been over 50 years since Israel took it as a spoil of war after all of the countries that surrounded them and some more invaded Israel from every side with a view to exterminating it, and they got their asses kicked. And they lost the West Bank and the Golan Heights, and they lost East Jerusalem and the Sinai Desert. That's how war works. Okay. Don from Beyond says, happily, federal executions are legal again, just in the nick of time. Well, that's the dream. Roger Stone was in direct contact with an Israeli cabinet minister. Okay. All right. Is that a violation of the Logan Act? Could be. Maybe Stone can be the first person to be convicted of this. Don from Beyond says, face masks are also bags of germs. Yes, I've seen this again. This claim that for civilians to wear face masks, it's concentrating the virus with liquidity, and then you're spraying this stuff through the mask. As I say, I don't have any strong opinions on this. I don't know what. Okay, so Roger Stone met with people in Israel. This big smoking gun here. All right. Okay. What? Yeah. Okay. All right. Yes, Alex DeLarge really doesn't seem to like Israel very much. Yeah, well, you know, the United States is the military and economic guarantor of Israel. I don't see that changing anytime soon. I think I've made my position on Israel pretty clear. I don't have any particular interest in the country. It is not. It's not naturally close to the United States or to my country, Canada. But we have. I don't know, been told that it is. Apparently that's the rule. You know, on the other hand, I find the campaign on the behalf of the Palestinians to be lachrymose liberalism. I dislike Israel's interference in U.S. elections. Okay, well, if we're going to go down that road, I guess the number one interferer in U.S. elections would be Mexico. And nobody wants to talk about that. Okay. So, ich bin Weltschmerz. Susan Rice. Yeah, you seen that picture of the last day of the Obama's White House? They all gathered for a portrait, and they just looked absolutely devastated, or perhaps they were just scared to death that what they had done was going to come to light. It took a long time, and I think that Trump needs to be applauded for his caution in this, because this is a situation that is really unparalleled in American history. That this does go all the way to the top, and one must be very careful. Aslan writes, millennial fembot on phone, walking her dog, was hogging the sidewalk. As she got closer, I yelled at her in Russian, BTFO, clueless mutt female. Tom Anderson says, does KMG still think the virus is a Democrat hoax? I never thought it was a Democrat hoax. I thought that the consequences of the virus have been and continue to be even more so grossly exaggerated, and I'll be getting to that soon. Okay, let's skip down to Yako Raipala says, Kevin has been more right about the virus than any other commentator that I've been listening to. And I guess it was, I think it was about the time of St. Patrick's Day, which is March the 17th. I just decided, after being scared to death for 6 weeks, I just decided, one, I wasn't frightened of this anymore, and two, that it was all spiraling out of control. And I suppose at that time that I had heard of Professor Neil Ferguson's notorious or infamous Imperial College black box, and I thought, seriously, the fate of the world depends on a black box? And I'll have more to say about the black box in a little while. Okay, so let's talk about the, how would you say, construction aficionado who was killed in Georgia a few days ago. Atlanta mayor calls Ahmaud Arbery killing a lynching. Says Trump's rhetoric gives racists permission. It's from Fox News. The mayor of Atlanta is called Keisha Lance Bottoms, which I think may be an even more amusing name than the mayor of San Francisco, who is a black woman called London Breed. It turns out that Keisha Lance Bottoms is the daughter of a prominent R&B star of the 60s and 70s who called himself Major Lance, rather. She compared the shooting death of 25-year-old Ahmaud Arbery in February to lynchings in the Jim Crow-era South, and said that President Trump's rhetoric gives racists permission to do it in an overt way, or overt. What was the last lynching in America? It was something like 1956. Bottom's comments made during an appearance on CNN's State of the Union come just days after a white father and son were charged with the February shooting death of Arbery as he was running through a Georgia neighborhood. It's 2020, and this was a lynching of an African-American man. Bottom says, my heart goes out to the family. With the rhetoric we hear coming out of the White House, she added, many who are prone to being racist are given permission to do it in an overt way that we wouldn't see in 2020. You mean like when Kanye West was invited to the White House, and when Trump decides to make major changes to federal law in a liberal way after being appealed to by Kanye's wife, Kim Kardashian? Trump said, I looked at a picture of that young man. He was in a tuxedo. I will say that he looks like a really good young guy. There's no point really in Trump diving into this because, you know, it's not his jurisdiction. Bottom's comments echo those made by many civil rights leaders across the country who have drawn comparison to Arbery's murder to that of Emmett Till. Oh, God. And other black men in the South during the 1950s and 60s. Oh, and here we go. Till, a black teen from Chicago, was kidnapped in 1955 in Mississippi, lynched, and dumped in a river after he was falsely accused of whistling at a white woman. Oh, he was falsely accused. Was he? From everything that I've read, and I've forced myself over the years to read quite a lot about it, Till made a disgusting sexual comment to a woman behind the counter. He was not from Mississippi. He certainly didn't deserve what happened to him. But again, Emmett Till has posthumously become a saint. The modern-day lynching of Mr. Arbery is yet another reminder of the vile and wicked racism that persists in parts of our country, said the Reverend James Woodall, state president of the Georgia NAACP. The slothfulness and inaction of the justice system in this case is a gross testament to the blatant white racial privileges that permeates throughout our country and our institutions. Yeah, you mean like Michael Brown? Where there was an absolutely exhaustive investigation into this. Yeah, let's recap the evidence here. Michael Brown stole a $50 box of cigars and strong-armed a Bangladeshi storekeeper, and then decided with his pal to walk down the middle of the street, because that's what one does when one has committed robbery. And then a police car was heard approaching, and Brown's accomplice decided to head for the hills, which is what a reasonable person would do. And then Michael Brown kept walking. And then when he was approached by the police car, he went right for the policeman, punched him, came very close to grabbing his gun. And the police officer got out of the car, told him to stop. He would not stop. And he charged the police officer, and it took, I don't know, something like 9 rounds to take him down. And he fell dead or dying, something like 2 or 3 feet away from the officer. And guess what? A whole bunch of people lied about what had happened, but exhaustive investigation cleared the officer, Darrell Brown, I believe his name was. But who got fired from the police force anyway, and his life is in ruins. And of course, Trayvon Martin, he just loved Skittles. He loved Skittles, and he also liked grounding and pounding. And after, the media went after the Florida state justice system and essentially bullied it into charging George Zimmerman, and Zimmerman was acquitted. Arbery's mother, Wanda Cooper Jones, has said she thinks her son, a former high school football player, was jogging for exercise before he was killed. Gregory and Travis McMichael told police they suspected Arbery was the same man recorded by a security camera committing a break-in. When they saw Arbery running on a Sunday afternoon, the McMichaels grabbed guns, got into a pickup truck, and pursued him. Video footage released on Tuesday shows a runner grappling with a man armed with a shotgun. Shots are fired and the runner staggers and falls. A Georgia Bureau of Investigation statement said the McMichaels confronted Arbery with 2 firearms and that Travis McMichael fatally shot Arbery. The felony murder charges against the McMichaels mean that the victim was killed during the commission of an underlying felony, in this case aggravated assault. The charge doesn't require intent to kill. A murder conviction in Georgia carries a minimum sentence of life in prison, either with or without parole. Okay. Subsequent video has been released that Arbery, he trespassed on private property to go into house under construction many times. When he was confronted by the father and son, he rushed them and grabbed the barrel of a shotgun, and he got shot through the hand as a result. This seems to be not a typical reaction. Now, the Dems are the real racist types. The conservatives have been all over Twitter saying, oh, I go into houses under construction all the time. Do you now? Really? 2 reasons why I don't believe these people. One, it's against the law, and you do not want to trespass on private property in the United States because typically in most jurisdictions, the owner of the property has the right to shoot you. And, to most people, someone pulling a gun on them, this is a very frightening experience. In fact, most of them, most people don't charge people pointing a shotgun at them. The other reason why you wouldn't want to trespass on a building site is that building sites are dangerous. Weren't these people taught that in school? The Justice Department considering hate crime charge in Ahmaud Arbery killing. What, is there any evidence that this was a hate crime? And yeah, what difference does it make? How is it possible? You know, oh yeah, someone killed someone else. Oh, now, you know, the death itself isn't particularly important. The fact that it was a hate crime, now that is particularly important. The thing that strikes me as being most idiotic about these hate crime charges is this is the worst crime ever. Well, it's our belief, not everyone holds this belief, but I'm sure the overwhelming majority of people hold this belief, is that killing for hire is the worst possible crime. Because people have all sorts of reasons to injure or kill other people, but a contract killer does this cold-bloodedly for money. The Civil Rights Division of the Department of Justice, the FBI, and the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of Georgia have been supporting and will continue to fully support and participate in the state investigation. We are assessing all of the evidence to determine whether hate crimes charges are appropriate, said Justice Department spokesperson Carrie Kupek. Under federal law, hate crimes can carry the death sentence for more serious and violent crimes. None of these stories that I've read so far indicate that the father is a former policeman, which, you know, might be relevant to a reporter. Oh, owners of property where Ahmaud Arbery was spotted denounce killers. Yes, of course they would. Who doesn't want to be on the wrong side of this? Now, I'm looking at official statement from the Office of the District Attorney, Waycross Judicial Circuit. And this is an explanation of why charges were not brought. And the fellow who came up with this states that he is the current elected district attorney for the Waycross Circuit. I've worked as a criminal prosecutor for some 36 years. As to the case at hand, it is my professional belief the autopsy confirms what we had already viewed as shown in the videotape, with the photographs and from the witness statements taken immediately at the scene. The autopsy supports the initial opinion we gave you on February 24th at the briefing room. After reviewing the evidence you had at the time, we do not see grounds for an arrest of any of the three parties. That would be the McMichaels and Brian William, who made a video recording of this. It appears Travis McMichael, Greg McMichael, and Brian William were following in hot pursuit a burglary suspect with solid first-hand probable cause in their neighborhood and telling him to stop. It appears their intent was to stop and hold this criminal suspect until law enforcement arrived. Under Georgia law, this is perfectly legal. OCGA 17460, quote, a private person may arrest an offender if the offense is committed in his presence or within his immediate knowledge. If the offense is a felony and the offender is escaping or attempting to escape, a private person may arrest him upon reasonable and probable grounds of suspicion, unquote. It clearly appears Travis McMichael and Greg McMichael had firearms being carried in an open fashion. The investigation shows neither of them to be convicted felons or under felony supervision. They were in a motor vehicle owned by Travis McMichael. Under Georgia law, this is legal open carry. The video was made by William Bryan, clearly showing the shooting in real time. From said video, it appears Ahmaud Arbery was running along the right side of the McMichael truck, then abruptly turns 90 degrees to the left and attacks Travis McMichael, who was standing at the front left corner of the truck. A brief skirmish ensues in which it appears Arbery strikes Michael and appears to grab the shotgun and pull it from McMichael. The first shot is through Arbery's right hand palm, which is consistent with him grabbing and pulling the shotgun at the barrel tip. The second and third wounds are consistent with the struggle for the shotgun as depicted in the video. The angle of the second shot with the rear of the buttstock being pushed away and down from the fight are also consistent with the upward angle of blood plume shown in the video, and that McMichael was attempting to push the gun away from Arbery while Arbery was pulling it towards himself. The third shot, too, appears to be in a struggle over the gun. McMichael was allowed to use deadly force to protect himself. Yeah, seems to be fairly straightforward. Trayvon course, was the little angel. And the more we learned about Trayvon, we learned that he was not a little angel. In fact, he kept being pushed back and forth between his mother and his father because both of them were sick of him. Now, let's see. From Monterey Peninsula College, the Wikipedia article on Arbery is infuriating. It makes sure to note that the local PD had been accused of covering up allegations of misconduct, tampering with a crime scene, interfering in investigation of a police shooting, and retaliating against fellow officers who cooperated with outside investigators. Also make sure to note that the local police chief was indicted on charges arising from an alleged cover-up of a sexual relationship that an officer had with an informant. No mention, however, of Arbery's own CV, which included charges for trespassing, shoplifting, bringing a loaded .380 to a school event, and parole violation. Who would bring a loaded gun to a school event? But I noticed that it seems to be fairly common amongst joggers, one might say, to bring loaded guns to things like baptisms, children's birthday parties. I don't claim to understand that, but there it is. This is from WSB TV in Atlanta. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation has arrested a man after a post on social media apparently threatening people protesting the shooting death of Ahmaud Arbery has caught the eye of investigators. On Sunday night, the agency said that it arrested Rashawn Smith, 20, and charged him with dissemination of information relating to terroristic acts. Police said he created a Facebook account of an unwitting individual to post a hoax threat. Now, of course, one gets the impression from stories of this type that white people are running around the United States regularly, finding black people and just shooting them, to death. As a matter of course, that I don't know, tens of thousands of innocent black men are killed by whites every year in the United States. This is not what the FBI data shows. It shows rather the reverse, in fact. If one wants to talk about a true hate crime, one could talk about the hideous massacre in Knoxville, Tennessee, but the media doesn't want to talk about that, has never wanted to talk about it. The latest, atrocity in New York City with a Barnard College student female was killed. That vanished down the memory hole, didn't it? Here's a contemporaneous story, which you're only going to find on places like Breitbart. A husband and wife in their 80s were fatally shot Friday morning while at the Delaware Veterans Memorial Cemetery in Bear, Delaware. The Daily Mail reports that the couple was from Elkton, Maryland, and they were allegedly shot by 29-year-old Sheldon Francis, who was found dead a few years later. The 85-year-old wife died at the scene. The 86-year-old husband was transported to a hospital in critical condition, and Delaware Online reports that he died Saturday. I'll leave you to guess the race of the perpetrator and the victims. So let's go to the chat briefly. Tom Anderson says, have you picked up a pair of Timberland boots to really up your jogging game? This is all too tiresome, this whole business. But again, it sends a message. And that message is that if you see suspicious behavior and you are of a certain skin color and that suspicious behavior comes from someone who is not of your skin color, leave it alone. Leave it alone. Maybe you can sell up when your neighborhood goes to hell. Because don't be like George Zimmerman and get involved in trying to protect your neighborhood because there will be serious attempts to destroy your life and send you to prison for the rest of your life to become a rape toy, if things go south. just, don't get involved. That's up to the police. The police have no interest, but them's the breaks, Yes, and it appears that the unfortunate young man was not wearing Timberland boots. But I don't know, there's so many videos, so many videos of this fellow inside the house under construction. No, it's, again, this talk of hate crimes, when there is no possible indication that this was a hate crime, what it tells you that the FBI and the Department of Justice are looking to find as many white people as they can to convict of hate crimes. Because, the United States is systemically racist, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we need to find great white defendants to ruin. Manfred von Thistlebaum says, I remember when even Bill Maher was arguing against the hate crime addition. Moonman says, hate crimes threaten the public order in diverse societies. Why the sovereign has reason to punish them. Okay, so let's go back to the other story. You know which one I'm talking about. It's from Big League Politics by Shane Trejo. Report, half of U.S. coronavirus deaths are in nursing homes after Democrats forced COVID patients into them. Well, we know what the figure in Canada was as of, 4 or 5 days ago. It was 82%. Which gives you a very strong idea of who is threatened by COVID-19. I mean, who is deadly threatened. New analysis by columnist Phil Kerpen indicates that half of coronavirus deaths recorded throughout the U.S. have come out of nursing homes. Kerpen's data indicates that there have been 32,161 COVID-19 deaths inside nursing homes out of 62,740 overall coronavirus deaths, amounting for 51.6%. These are the numbers, including New York, which has been doubled to compensate for hospital deaths being excluded. In some states, the number surpasses 50% by a wide margin. Pennsylvania, 67, Massachusetts, 60, Maryland, 60, North Carolina, 60, Virginia, 57, and New Jersey, 50. The number of coronavirus deaths out of nursing homes has consistently risen, and the most vulnerable have been put needlessly at risk due to the tragic decisions of Democrat governors in blue states. Michigan State Senator Lana Thies of Brighton called out anti-Trump Governor Gretchen Whitmer, she's the one with the strangely immobile face, for allowing COVID-19 patients to be housed at nursing homes and infect the most vulnerable needlessly. Given that 64% of deceased COVID-19 patients in Michigan are over the age of 70, it simply does not make sense to unnecessarily increase the risk of infection and death of existing nursing home residents by moving in people who have already been infected. Well, you would think so, right? I respectfully suggest that this practice be immediately discontinued and that such persons be relocated to alternative sites, perhaps including existing field hospitals that have been constructed for the express purpose of treating COVID-19. In New York, Governor Andrew Cuomo, the Love Gov, or Governor Death, as I prefer to call him, actually issued an edict forcing nursing homes to take in coronavirus patients. This has caused observers to say that Cuomo has blood on his hands. Morbidly, the state of New York gave body bags to nursing homes as the coronavirus patients were transferred there. My colleague noticed that one of the boxes was extremely heavy. Curious as to what it could possibly be making that particular box so much heavier than the rest, he opened it. The first 2 coronavirus patients were accompanied by 5 body bags. The healthcare executive was flabbergasted at Cuomo's mismanagement of the entire situation and the lives that have been lost as a result. Cuomo has blood on his hands. He really does. There's no way to sugarcoat this, the executive said. Why in the world would you be sending coronavirus patients to a nursing home where the most vulnerable population to this disease resides? Well, there were CDC protocols on this, but Andrew Cuomo didn't bother to check beforehand whether these nursing homes were in any position to come up to the CDC protocols, and it turns out that they were not. The New York Post has led this story. 5,200 deaths too late, governor's about face. Cuomo finally flips on nursing home scandal. Governor Cuomo yesterday reversed his policy of making nursing homes accept COVID-19 patients, leaving residents like sitting ducks. We're just not going to send a person who is positive to a nursing home after a hospital visit, he said, period. This is a front page of the New York Post today. You know, when people, this, rhetorical device of, repeating the statement, very melodramatic, or saying, period. Yeah, what a tough guy Andrew Cuomo is. He's responsible for thousands of deaths, solely responsible for thousands of deaths. Yet he is being treated as a hero. And what? He has his own show. He's got his own brother act on CNN with his hapless brother, Chris. I will remind listeners that Chris Cuomo has two looks. There's the look where he looks as if he's about to burst into tears, and there's the other look, to use the words of Dan on the HBO show Veep. He has the look of a surprised masturbator. And so they, gab for an hour and talk about who mom loved best and recipes. And strangely, Andrew does not ask Chris, hey, why did you break the protocol? And we know you broke the protocol because you got into this dispute with a man on a motorcycle who you decided to traduce as a fat biker. And you made this public, that you broke the protocol when you'd made a big fuss of being in quarantine. And then you had the staged release from quarantine, which was kind of ridiculous because we all know that you'd been out with your wife and your children and some other woman. And of course, Chris does not ask his brother, were you on drugs when you ordered the nursing homes to take in thousands of people infected with COVID-19? Yeah, this is an absolutely remarkable story. All nursing home staff must now be tested twice a week for the virus, and hospitals may not discharge any infected patient to a nursing home until the patient tests negative, Cuomo said. Residents are being tested as much as possible. If a nursing home cannot provide proper care, the patient must be transferred to the state, which he said has ample available hospital beds. Yes. Yeah, they're running about like 20% capacity, New York State hospitals. In a just world, Andrew Cuomo would face hundreds or thousands of counts of manslaughter. But I'm not holding my breath waiting for that. I don't know. I'd be sufficient if he resigned in disgrace and then disappeared from public life, much like former Attorney General Eliot Spitzer. And there's a piece by Noah Rothman in Commentary, which got so many hits, I suppose because it was linked to by Instapundit, that I simply couldn't get it to load. I guess their server was overloaded. But there's a précis here from Instapundit. In a historic move on April the 30th, Cuomo announced that the New York City subway system would temporarily cease 24-hour operations so that cars could be disinfected. The governor himself made a conspicuous trip to New York City's unfortunately named Corona Maintenance Facility for a tour and a photo op. This was an important directive, but one that likely came months too late. On April 13th, a working paper published by an economist with MIT indicated that by early March, the subways were a major disseminator of coronavirus. According to new research, New York City's outbreak had become so bad that by late March, the city was responsible for seeding much of the country with the virus. Even if those connections are speculative, the death toll among MTA workers is hard to ignore. By April 22nd, 83 transit workers had died as a result of complications from COVID-19 infections. For this tragedy, MTA Chief Patrick Foy blamed the CDC and the World Health Organization for failing to prepare them for the scale of the disaster. All nursing home staff must now be tested for COVID twice a week, Cuomo tweeted on Monday. This rule is not optional, it's mandatory. The governor assumed this authoritative and overdue position amid a nightmarish death toll in mid-Atlantic homes for the aged. Over 5,300 residents of nursing homes have died from the virus, but this death toll was no doubt exacerbated by the governor's March 25th directive that forced senior care facilities to accept new admissions, even if they come from hospitals and could be infected themselves. Even as the governor described his state's nursing homes as a feeding frenzy for this virus, the directive remained in place. Only on Sunday did Cuomo rescind the order. No elected official got the pandemic entirely right. States like Ohio, which had one of the most aggressive and preventive early responses to the outbreak, are seeing cases increase. Meanwhile, states like Georgia and Florida, which were ruthlessly attacked for relaxing restrictions too soon, have seen their caseloads stabilize or decline. There's a lot we still don't know about this virus, and it is incumbent on observers to forgive some of the mistakes that are being made along the way. But even a cursory review of Andrew Cuomo's record during this event should disqualify him from the excessive adulation he's received. Whatever it is that's generating the sycophancy Cuomo has enjoyed, it is not his performance. And note this, Cuomo is now describing the coronavirus pandemic that originated in Wuhan, China as a, quote, European virus, unquote. He said this in today's presser multiple times. Last month, he lavished praise on the Chinese government for their efforts in combating virus. As Carol Markowitz of the New York Post tweets, does he realize the rest of the country will start calling it the New York virus if we're just going by where it most recently came from? So, according to Thomson Reuters, Trump, with an eye on re-election, yeah, as opposed to all those politicians who have no interest in their re-election, accuses Democrats of reopening U.S. states too slowly. Trump accused Democrats on Monday of moving to reopen U.S. states from coronavirus lockdown measures too slowly for political advantage without providing evidence to support his claim. The Republican president, who is running for re-election in November, thank you for reminding us of this, Thomson Reuters. I had no idea. Is working to reopen the crippled economy quickly against recommendations from health experts to move more cautiously to avoid a resurgence of the virus that has so-called killed more than 80,000 people in the United States. Trump has encouraged states to ease restrictions designed to mitigate the spread of the coronavirus. On Monday, he targeted the election battleground state of Pennsylvania, which has a Democratic governor, Tom Wolf. The great people of Pennsylvania want their freedom now, and they are fully aware of what that entails. The Democrats are moving slowly all over the USA for political purposes. They would wait until November 3rd if it were up to them. Don't play politics, be safe, move quickly, Trump said in a Twitter post. It's really difficult not to see this as political when all the Democrat states are attacking Trump and saying, we're going to reopen, maybe never, the vaccine. You know, there are no coronavirus vaccines. There aren't any. Do people know that? You know, if you could come up with coronavirus vaccines, you know, then how about a vaccine for the common cold? You know how much that would be worth? And I don't think it's for lack of trying. So once again, we have to look at the consequences of this madness. And Jim Kunstler writes today, why won't the markets keep chugging if the Federal Reserve keeps stuffing bales of dollars into Wall Street's boilers? Jay Powell and his crew of monomaniacs apparently believe that bolstering the indexes is the sole signifier of a healthy system. And they've turned early adapters to modern monetary theory, the idea that government can print as much money as it feels like to keep the wheels of activity turning, or at least the appearance of activity. In just 2 months, they've churned out trillions equal to the first 200 plus years of the USA's national debt. And of course, new money is new debt because under our currency regime, money is loaned into existence. Well, one reason the markets may not keep chugging is that money is disappearing into the old black hole of extinction even faster than the Fed can enter keystrokes that magically represent new money. The reason, if in fact money is loaned into existence, it is defaulted out of existence when the loans are not paid back. After all, that's what a loan is, money advanced on a promise to be paid back, generally at interest, Interest representing the time value of money, that is the duration of the loan. Do you have any idea how many loans are not being paid back and may now never be paid back? Start with houses. 63% of homeowners pay a mortgage, a loan, every month. The national average outstanding mortgage debt is $148,000. Total mortgage debt is $10.3 trillion. Now cars. There are roughly 260 million passenger vehicles registered in America, with upward of 100 million of them bought on loans that are still active, amounting to $1.2 trillion. Enough to buy 53 million Ford Fusions at $23,000 each. Now credit card debt. Total for the U.S. is $3.9 trillion, with an average carried balance of $9,333. Meanwhile, 45% of adult Americans have no savings. It's hard to project an exact figure, but with over 20% of the U.S. workforce idle with no income, there's liable to be a lot of debt that's not being paid back, will never be paid back, and a lot of money headed into extinction. That will translate into a lot of people with no money. Until all that money they owed is finished not being paid back, and the new money the Fed is busy creating with no relationship to the production of things of value overcomes the old money that's finished disappearing, then Americans will have plenty of money. The catch is that the money will be worthless. Thus, the two ways of going broke: having no money or having lots of money that's too worthless to buy anything. So it goes. Along with people's hopes and dreams of a decent life. What you see then is a nation and a system that has come to be based on broken promises. That's what the restless public will take away from this morass of statistics. The discord will rapidly leave the statistical frame and take hold in the emotional frame, and that frame will feature entirely negative emotion, rage, resentment, grievance, vengeance, feelings like that. The sum of all broken promises is a broken social contract. That's the agreement that we will behave civilly in exchange for the liberty to go about our business within clearly defined rules, laws about what is legitimate business. A broken social contract is exactly what all these machinations are leading up to. Hence, the appearances of the state, the system, and the people who run it become more and more fantastically and transparently dishonest. For instance, the fake candidacy of Joe Biden, a man too far gone in age and mind to be president, with a long slime trail of money grubbing in and around his official offices, and now an old sexual molestation charge against him. Who do the Democrats think they're kidding with this? The coronavirus gave them the excuse to stuff Joe in a closet for 2 months, but can they keep hiding him after the grand opening up? Will Wall Street and its errand boys and the Federal Reserve keep working their shifty hoodoo, enriching shareholders, hedge funders, and corporate execs while everybody else hits the red line of hunger and outrage? Will Trump do what he suggested way back on the campaign trail in 2016 and declare a national bankruptcy? There is, after all, a difference between bankruptcy and national insurrection. Bankruptcy, at least, holds the promise of a workout. Financial workouts are generally painful but orderly. That could make all the difference. From the Daily Mail, coronavirus blamed for 75% of New York City's 24,000 excess deaths, as the fatalities tripled the usual rate at the height of the outbreak. Between March 11th and May 2nd, a total of 32,107 deaths were reported in New York. Researchers found that 24,172 were excess, 3 times the typical number of 7,935 usually reported during this time. The excess deaths included about 14,000 confirmed COVID-19 deaths and 5,048 probable COVID-19 deaths. Well, we have seen in many places in the United States that deaths are said to be confirmed COVID-19 deaths when they are not, in fact, confirmed deaths. The CDC says the high number of excess deaths may be linked to people with pre-existing conditions or those who waited to seek life-saving medical care. Well, yes, that's when the other shoe is going to drop, when we learn, I'm sure the media doesn't want us to know this, that millions or tens of millions around the world are dying because of the COVID-19 panic and the decision to destroy the economy with its attendant supply lines for everything. This is unprecedented in human history. It has been known for economies to be largely shuttered because of war. And in many cases in the past, the economies got going rather quickly. But if one wants to look, say, after the First World War, the Second World War, the economy was like a baby compared to what it is now. The economy was really quite simple back in those days. It is not simple anymore. And so much of what we get, what's manufactured, what we eat, what we drink, et cetera, comes from, wait for it, the People's Republic of China. Again, from the Mail, experts feel the U.S. coronavirus death toll could be double the official figures at up to 160,000 due to inconsistencies in reporting and ongoing testing shortages as Trump champions reopenings. Well, if you're going to conclude that every death is a COVID-19 death, I suppose they can manage to bring that number up high enough, close to Professor Neil Ferguson's astounding and stupid prediction of 2.2 million, and that seems to be the goal. That the numbers must be raised in order to match the predictions, otherwise people would say, how on earth, where do these predictions come from? This is nonsense. Why would you ever trust Imperial College again? And according to the Wall Street Journal, New York City medical examiner doing limited coronavirus testing on the dead, citing unprecedented circumstances, office uses interviews to determine whether virus has caused home deaths. There's no shortage of tests in the United States now, no shortage of all. But no, instead we'll just look for any excuse to say that a person died from COVID-19. Let's see, I'm looking at this picture here from the Washington Post, and it's a restaurant, CC Coffee and Kitchen. It's in Castle Rock, Colorado, and it appears to be jammed with customers, with people waiting at the counter and people sitting at tables, adults and children, and nobody seems to be terrified. So apparently sanity is returning. The day after CNC Coffee and Kitchen defied Democratic Governor Jared Polis's executive safer at home order, packing the restaurant with hundreds of customers on Mother's Day, the regional health department ordered the business to shut down immediately until authorities could determine if the business was in compliance with coronavirus-related restrictions, according to a statement from the agency. Nearly every table was full after the restaurant opens its doors on Sunday morning. Customers crowded around the counter waiting for their orders. The line to place them went out the door, wrapping around the side of the building. Almost no one was wearing a face mask. For the owners of the breakfast campaign, it was a way to celebrate both Mother's Day and to openly push back against policies they believe are strangling the American economy. The decision was met with enthusiasm in the wealthy enclave south of Denver as customers flocked. Wealthy enclave? I've been told for weeks now, for months now, that the only people who would be interested, in violating, in flouting safer at home, lockdown orders were idiots. They were mentally challenged, and poor people perhaps, but they're poor because they're stupid. The COVIDiots. Apparently, in this wealthy enclave, these people, and it's Mother's Day, so there's an awful lot of women here. Just say at least 60% women. Apparently, they're not worried. Open defiance of government orders has become a political rallying point for small businesses from coast to coast as the nation's shutdown nears 2 months. More than 20.5 million Americans lost their jobs in April, and the unemployment rate has soared to nearly 15%, an economic catastrophe for some that has them questioning the logic of shutting down to prevent the spread of the virus, which has now killed about 80,000 Americans and has infected more than 1.3 million. Oh, do you think there was a way that the city of San Francisco could use COVID-19 to make their city even more disgusting and unlivable than it was previously. They're up to the challenge. The streets of San Francisco's Tenderloin district have experienced a 300% increase in the number of homeless tents since the coronavirus outbreak began, according to a federal lawsuit filed by the community and a law school. Residents, businesses, and the University of California Hastings College of Law are suing to demand the city clean up drug needles and human waste, which have littered the streets. The litigation also demands that assistance be provided for individuals living in sidewalk tents, arguing that they are an increased risk of contracting COVID-19. About 400 tents currently occupy the neighborhood, as San Francisco has had 1,943 confirmed cases of the coronavirus. Are you kidding me? And 34 deaths. It's the plague! The plague! In Victoria, where I live, there is now a very large tent city, perhaps as large as San Francisco's, which goes for several blocks down Pandora Street and several blocks along Vancouver Street. And that neighborhood was already kind of dodgy, but it's a neighborhood that a great many Victorians have to pass through or walk through. And maybe it'll just be, abandoned to the chuds. Maybe it will just become the chud territory from now on. Where it's possible, I've already decided to make a bolo route. There's a Save on Foods there at that corner, which is, I suppose, the closest supermarket to where I'm staying. But I don't want to pass through the tent city. Okay. William Briggs has a piece on his website about the experts. Got to listen to the experts, right? But he mentions Twitter and Google, other platforms, pointing you to expert knowledge. And he asks a very good question. How do they know which information is best? A better question is, how do they know which information is worst? Because many platforms are hard at whacking material they don't approve of. Susan Wojcicki, the chief of YouTube, was on CNN announcing which videos would be purged. Anything that is problematic would be removed. Anything unsubstantiated would be classed as a violation of our terms of service and would be removed. Anything that would go against World Health Organization would be a violation of our policy and would be removed. It reminds me of the when I started working at Kogo Radio in San Diego in 1994. I had to sign an employment agreement. And there was just clause after clause of, if you do this, you will be fired. If you do that, you will be fired. If you do this, you will be disciplined and then fired. There was just like dozens of them. Which WHO, Briggs asked. The WHO changed the narrative more than once. On 14th January, they tweeted preliminary investigations conducted by the Chinese authorities have found no clear evidence of human-to-human transmission of the novel coronavirus identified in Wuhan, China. They later changed their mind. Wojcicki was true to her word, though. Many videos were purged, which questioned the official narrative, even as that narrative shifted. The most spectacular case was that of doctors Dan Erickson and Artin Masihi from Bakersfield, California, which we've talked about several times. YouTube responded by purging the video. It cropped up several times on the platform. It was whack-a-mole each time. As the saying goes, nothing can die on the internet, and so the video still shows up in my places, including the official news site. In a humorous twist, surely not foreseen by the officious Wojcicki, the purging itself made the news and provided the doctors with more publicity than they ever would have had without the meddling. Well, I'm sure Wojcicki knows about this. There's a term called the Streisand effect, which is, 15, 20 years old. That is to say, well, I'm assuming that she's heard of the Streisand effect. Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg went on ABC News explaining why his company attempted to memory hole an event page for protest against government overreach in Michigan. Zuckerberg said that kind of thing was harmful misrepresentation and he would have none of it. His move backfired for Facebook too. Not that the exposure of their censorship caused them to rethink their position. According to Michigan Live, a flack at Facebook justified the purge, saying events that defy government's guidance on social distancing aren't allowed on Facebook. Government's guidance. Well, how about the government of President Donald Trump? You know, sanctuary cities, stuff like that. All manner of things. Well, why doesn't Mark Zuckerberg take up the cudgels for President Trump? Why is he only taking up the cudgels for the World Health Organization's government guidance? I won't think that the federal government of the United States was pretty important. Big tech is peopled with experts, smart people on the move. The days of Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, and Susan Wojcicki working out of garages is over, however. The first office of Google's Larry Page and Sergey Brin was in Wojcicki's garage, and the rumor is that's why she is where she is today. These days, the vast majority of software engineers and tech business leaders have their expertise credentialed by institutions of higher learning. Obviously, professors, researchers, and bureaucrats at places like the WHO are themselves likewise credentialed. There's nothing wrong with these credentials per se. They really do, for the most part, certify advanced knowledge in the field, an increasingly narrow field for the majority, however. Now, I'll just point out that Professor Neil Ferguson, his PhD is in theoretical physics. He doesn't have a medical degree. He's not an epidemiologist. He's just apparently really good at making black boxes. But I don't know, we can all pick our experts. Connor Friedersdorf at The Atlantic says that the shutdown skeptics should be taken seriously. This is not a straightforward battle between a pro-human and a pro-economy camp. Should states ease pandemic restrictions or extend lockdowns and shelter-in-place orders into the summer? That question confronts leaders across the United States. Trump says that we have to get our country open, and many governors are moving quickly in that direction. Critics are dismayed, citing forecasts that COVID-19 deaths could rise to 3,000 per day in June. They say that reopening without better defenses against infections is reckless. That assessment may well be correct. Many insist it is immoral, too. The columnist Amy Z. Quinn says the Trump administration is choosing money over lives. Oh, boo, groaned hiss. In a CNN News analysis, Daniel Burke offers this characterization of America's choice. Should we reopen the economy to help the majority or to protect the lives of the vulnerable? Well, if protecting the lives of the vulnerable, if that's at the top of priorities, then you morons have failed spectacularly. All you have to do is to look at the nursing homes. Look at the nursing homes in both the United States and Canada. Because it wouldn't be that much of an exaggeration to say that given how these people were treated, they were just considered, mangy, disease-ridden, useless cattle to be culled. Denunciations of that sort cast the lockdown debate as a straightforward battle between a pro-human, yay, and a pro-economy, boo, camp. But the actual trade-offs are not straightforward. Set aside flattening the curve, which will continue to make sense. It's been flattened. It's flattened weeks ago. Are ongoing onerous shutdowns warranted beyond what is necessary to avoid overwhelming ambulances, hospitals, and morgues? The answer depends in part on an unknown how close the country is to containing the virus. Connor Friedersdorf is a resolutely mainstream thinker. So it is very encouraging to see this in The Atlantic. Toby Young at Lockdown Skeptics. Boris Johnson. I've had these people cheering Boris Johnson. Oh, it's going to be great again in Britain because Boris Johnson is now Prime Minister. I've never liked Boris Johnson, certainly not as a politician. He's a panderer. He's always been a panderer. There's never been any group of people that he wouldn't pander to. He has wanted to be Prime Minister for a very, very long time. I suppose you could compare him to Winston Churchill in that sense, because as I once wrote about Churchill, that he lusted for power as a child lusts for sweets. But Winston Churchill, he wanted war. So, Neville Chamberlain was found to be insufficient after the Norway campaign, which was Churchill's stupid idea. So Churchill got to be, prime minister in charge of the war. Boris Johnson is one of those politicians that, wow, this is my happiest day. I am now the leader of my country. Oh my God, what am I going to do now? I don't have any idea. Toby Young writes, keeping the handbrake on is a polite way of describing Boris's raft of announcements yesterday about how and when the lockdown is going to be eased. On Twitter, I described it as placing the country on double secret probation. That's an Animal House reference. So elaborate are the rules about when we're allowed out of our domestic prisons. Others have been more forthright. One reader described the Prime Minister's speech as a nothing burger squared, while Kathy Gingell at Conservative Woman has a new name for our glorious leader, Bottler Boris. The weird thing is, lots of people think he went too far. Jeremy Corbyn, for instance. London Mayor Sadiq Khan has responded by saying wearing masks on public transport should be compulsory. This is the same mayor who said that, terrorism is just, it's part of the price you pay for living in a big, glorious metropolis such as London. One thing that stood out in Boris's speech was how often he mentioned the R, the rate of infection. Clearly, how free we're allowed to be is inextricably bound up with what the R number is, although the details were hard to follow. That led Ben Pyle, a spiked contributor, to post this amusing summary of the speech on Twitter. If I understand the Prime Minister, the level of alert will be updated by scientists checking their Rs. If they think Rs is low, then we can be free. But if their Rs is high, then we must be locked up again. Scientists will be speaking to the Prime Minister through their Rs. The PM will be checking the scientists' Rs every day. Scientists will also be checking each other's Rs, a method pioneered by Professor Neil Ferguson and his lover. If there's one straw to clutch at, it's that Boris has abandoned the crackpot notion that any reimposition of restrictions after some modest easing would be an economic disaster. Yes, Belarus. We mustn't forget Belarus, Toby Young writes. A reader reminded me yesterday that no lockdown has been imposed in the Eastern European Republic and has experienced one of the mildest COVID outbreaks anywhere in the world. Only 135 deaths so far, which works out at 14 per million. Who would have suspected that Alexander Lukashenko, the autocratic president of Belarus, would have managed this crisis better than our own democratically elected leaders? As Mark puts it in the comments beneath yesterday's daily update, what a state we have come to when a thugging, aging Belarusian autocrat makes our entire political, media, and social elite look like a bunch of scared, hysterical, old women. He asked, what happened to the much heralded Porton-Down antibody testing survey that involved randomly testing tens of thousands of people with a view to building up a picture of just how many Britons have been infected? It was announced over a month ago, and I haven't heard a peep about it since. Can any reader throw any light on this? Well, I can, as I suggested some time ago. The British government doesn't want to do antibody tests because they will be horrified to find out how many millions of Britons have already been infected, exposed to COVID virus, already have the antibodies. And this is what we discovered, for instance, in California and other places. But no, you see, if the antibody testing is done, and if it turns out that a very significant amount of the British population has already been infected, and that herd immunity may have been reached, and may have been reached weeks ago, I don't know, then Boris may find himself out of a job. Guy de la Bédoyère has a piece on Lockdown Skeptics called Britain's COVID Reich. All states progress towards totalitarianism. This does not mean that they will get there or even get very far along the way, though some do. But the direction of travel is always towards totalitarianism. The only possible way of preventing this is constant vigilance. The totalitarian state is defined by an intolerance of diversity, whether in thought or behavior. The use of propaganda is an essential ingredient in establishing not only all forms of intolerance of diversity, but encouraging widespread support for them. The propaganda is integral to the state's ideology, itself built around usually the depiction of a utopian future, however implausible. The end justifies the means. Intolerance is enshrined in the ideology enforced through the annihilation of political opposition, control of the media, and control of the economy. The unifying of society against a common enemy is often another vital ingredient. I've mentioned before on a live stream, perhaps this one, that during the Cuban Missile Crisis, I was in the second grade, and some bright spark, not me, put up his hand and asked the nun essentially what the dispute was about. And the nun explained that the Soviet Union was a society very different from ours. For instance, the people were constantly being bullied with slogans, bullied with demands. There were billboards up that said, you know, eat vegetables if there happen to be vegetables in the shop, or, you know, fulfill the dictates of the 5-year plan, that sort of thing. We were all horrified. But of course, I noticed by the 1980s that there were, you know, billboards everywhere instructing us on what not to do and what to do about practically everything. You know, I found it difficult to, I don't know, watch an episode of TV, some rerun, you know, at dinner, without some sort of PSA coming on talking about sexually transmitted disease. Because it's, you know, it's 5:30 in the afternoon, and that's absolutely, it's the dinner hour, and that's when you want to talk about sexually transmitted disease. Essentially, in terms of agitprop, conditions here in the West now are as bad or perhaps worse than they were in the Soviet Union in 1962. The SAS writes, one of the most remarkable aspects of the creation of Britain's COVID Reich was that even in the middle of the government's witless, confused, and ambivalent approach to the crisis, it was able to rustle up overnight many of the key ingredients of totalitarianism. The ideology and the slogans and the continual repetition of the message with the supine assistance of broadcast media all fell into place with frightening speed. The speed with which the great British public acquiesced was even more alarming. Oh, yes. Polls in Britain apparently show that something like 9 out of 10 Britons say that they don't want the country opened up too soon, and that they're pleased. I wonder about polling numbers like that, because polling is all about manufactured consent, and the polling may be anonymous, but this requires an affirmation to tell a pollster that, no, I do not agree with the government's policy. These sort of polls, they don't measure intensity. Now, I suspect that if you had polled the residents of this wealthy enclave in Colorado that I was talking about a few minutes ago, you would find overwhelming support for the shutdown. But when it comes to it, you know, all of the Karens were at this upscale eatery on Mother's Day. So they say what they think needs to be said. At the Off Guardian, as Britain hurtles headlong towards neo-feudalist governance with heightened surveillance, micromanagement of society, and an uptick in fascistic policing of the draconian measures imposed to combat the threat of COVID-19, it's perhaps time to analyze the real forces behind this new normal. There's no serious doubt over the correlation between lockdown and saving lives. Reality is creeping into the COVID-19 dialogue. It is becoming increasingly apparent that people are getting sick because they are being isolated and effectively living under house arrest, condemned as murderers if they so much as think about breaking curfew, being snitched on by neighbors for gathering more than 2 people together in their back gardens. And yes, the numbers game is acting in many instances as a smokescreen. It's impossible to rely upon official statistics that widely vary from one website to another, statistics that rely upon unreliable and sporadic testing procedures and based upon death certificates that misrepresent the actual cause of death as COVID-19, regardless of pre-existing medical conditions. And the newly emerging statistics are now increasingly undermining initial conclusions. Afshin Ratanzi tweets, "The Telegraph claims an estimated 7,500 killed by coronavirus in UK care homes." Boris Johnson government has not been revealing numbers to the media, claiming they couldn't calculate them. It is now accepted that there is a high mortality rate among the elderly in care homes and in the UK and globally among the same elderly civilians who are being asked to sign do not resuscitate forms. This amounts to signing their own death warrant should they present any of the COVID-19 symptoms. They will be neglected, isolated from their families when at their most vulnerable, and left alone to die, even though it is possible that they have not contracted the virus. Britain now has received an estimated 1.4 million new benefit claims for welfare payments, about 7 times the normal level. The government has pledged to bail out 80% of pay of workers who are temporarily laid off. But I've personally spoken to self-employed individuals who find themselves falling between the cracks that qualify them for financial support and now face an indefinite period of time without income. Now, I just think it's glaringly obvious. Well, the unemployment continues to spiral out of control, and the government says that it's going to pay 80% of their wages. Where's this money going to come from? Neil Ferguson, a professor at Imperial College, was responsible for the modeling of response to COVID-19. His virtual model was recommended by the World Health Organization, and it passed through into policy with virtually no scrutiny. Ferguson's dramatic prediction of 500,000 deaths in the UK became the foundation of Boris Johnson's U-turn from herd immunity to collective quarantine. While some understood that Ferguson later reduced his mortality calculations, he actually doubled down on his projections on Twitter, insisting that without drastic lockdown measures, the numbers would be even higher. Ferguson was instrumental in the modeling of the British government's response to foot and mouth disease in 2001, which Professor Michael Thrusfield of Edinburgh University, an expert in animal diseases, said that his modeling was not fit for purpose and seriously flawed. Thrusfield has highlighted the limitations of Ferguson's mathematical modeling methods and applied the doubts he expressed over foot and mouth disease to the current COVID-19 crisis response. An estimated 12 million animals were slaughtered as a result of Ferguson's 2001 initiative. The farming community was devastated by suicides and bankruptcies that have irretrievably altered the landscape of British agriculture, forcing healthy small holdings into agri-corporate mergers and empowering the EU central governments in the agricultural sector. And there's more detail here on Neil Ferguson. Oh yes, in 2002, Ferguson predicted that up to 50,000 people would die from a variant Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, better known as mad cow disease, increasing to 150,000 people if the epidemic expanded to include sheep. The reality is, since 1990, 178 people in the United Kingdom have died from Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease. In 2005, Ferguson claimed that up to 200 million people would be killed by H5N1, the bird flu. By early 2006, the WHO had linked only 78 deaths to the virus out of 147 reported cases. In 2009, Ferguson and his team at Imperial advised the government that swine flu, or H1N1, would probably kill 65,000 people in the UK. In the end, swine flu claimed the lives of 457 people in the UK. Now in 2020, Ferguson and Imperial College have released a report which claims that 500,000 Britons and 2.2 million Americans may be killed by COVID-19. Look, it is difficult, again, to avoid conspiracy thinking at this point. Neil Ferguson has proved himself not just wrong, but disastrously wrong again and again. So there is a new or novel disease that's come out of China late last year. So who do we go to for the modeling which results in the destruction of the world economy, the destruction of society, and the end of civil liberties? Let's go back to Neil Ferguson. You know, what is it, 5th time lucky? I'm just, why? Why go back to Neil Ferguson? Was there an end in view here? And there's another piece on Off Guardian about a story which went viral on Twitter about two nurses who were in the intensive care unit at Swansea Hospital, and they had died, you know, frontline workers, et cetera, et cetera. Well, it never happened, but it didn't make any difference because it was repeated again and again. Sue Denham, who we talked about last week, he has made a second analysis of Ferguson's model. The hidden history. Someone realized they could unexpectedly recover parts of the deleted history from GitHub, meaning we now have an audit log of changes dating back to April 1st. This is still not exactly the original code Ferguson ran, but is significantly closer. I should mention, code has been released, but it's not Ferguson's code, because the fabled black box that he wrote 13 years ago. Because for weeks, coders, and we don't know how many, but a lot of coders at Microsoft have been engaged in a mad rush to tart up Ferguson's black box. Imperial College staff claim the released and original code are essentially the same functionally, which is why they do not think it would be particularly helpful to release a second code base, which is functionally the same. In fact, the second change in the recorded history is a fix for a critical error in the random number generator. Other changes fix data corruption bugs, another one. Algorithmic errors, fixing the fact that someone on the team can't spell household. And whilst this was taking place, other Imperial academics continue to add new features related to contact tracing apps. The stated justification for deleting the history was to make the repository rather easy to download, because the history squash, erase, merge a number of changes we were making with large data files. We do not think there is much benefit in trawling through our internal commit histories. The entire repository is less than 100 megabytes. Given they recommend a computer with 20 gigabytes of memory to run the simulation for the UK, the cost of downloading the data files is immaterial. Fetching the additional history only took a few seconds on my home Wi-Fi. Even if the files have been large, the tools make it easy to not download history if you don't want it to solve this exact problem. I don't quite know what to make of this. Originally, I thought these claims were a result of the academics not understanding the tools they're working with, but with the Microsoft employees helping them are actually employees of a recently acquired company, GitHub. GitHub is the service they're using to distribute the source code and files. To defend this, I'd have to argue that GitHub employees don't understand how to use GitHub, which is implausible. So essentially what we're seeing here is more lying from Imperial College. Someone called Streetwise Professor has a piece on this black box, and this fellow is perhaps even more incredulous than Sue Denham. He writes, these predictions have been proved to be farcically wrong, with death tolls exaggerated by 1 and perhaps 2 orders of magnitude. Models only become science when tested against data experiment. By that standard, the Imperial College model failed spectacularly. Whoops, what's a few trillions of dollars, right? I was suspicious of this model from the first, not only because of its doomsday predictions and the failures of previous models produced by Imperial and the leader of its team, Neil Ferguson, but because of my general skepticism about big models. As Soncharm used to say, all large calculations are wrong. And most important, because Imperial failed to disclose its code. That is a huge red flag. Why are they hiding? And how right that was. A version of the code has been released, and it is a hot mess. It has more bugs than East Africa does. This is one code review. Biggest takeaway, due to bugs in the code, the model results are not reproducible. The code itself introduces random variation in the model. That means that runs with the same inputs generate different outputs. Are you fucking kidding me? Reproducibility is the essence of science. A model whose predictions cannot be reproduced, let alone empirical results based on that model, is so much crap. It is the antithesis of science. And yes, and someone else who had seen it says the code is worthless. Another correspondent said, I spent 3 days reviewing his code last week. It's an ugly mess of thousands of lines of C, not C++, as has been reported. reported. There are hundreds of input parameters, not counting the fact it models population density to 1 kilometer times 1 kilometer cells and 4 different infection mechanisms. It made me feel quite ill. How do you estimate hundreds of parameters? Sounds like a climate model. Yes, it shares exactly the same philosophy as a GCM. Model everything but badly. Yes, it's just, well, terrible. It's worthless. It's a scandal. As I said last week, quite possibly the most appalling academic scandal in history. And let's see, someone at the blog Bits and Bugs, Chris von Safalwe, Hungarian name, I'm not very good at pronouncing them. Neil Ferguson had tweeted back in March, I'm conscious that lots of people would like to see and run the pandemic simulation code we're using to model control measures against COVID-19. To explain the background, I wrote the code, thousands of lines of undocumented C 13 plus years ago to model flu pandemics. And the SAS says, that, sir, is not a feature. It is not even a bug. It's somewhere between negligence and unintentional but grave scientific misconduct. For those who are not in the computational fields, my code is too complicated for you to get it is not an acceptable excuse. It is the duty of everyone who releases code to document it within the code base or outside. Greater minds than Neil Ferguson have a tough enough time navigating a large code base, and especially when you have collaborators, it is not unusual to need a second or two to remember what a particular function is doing or what the arguments should be like. Or, to put it more bluntly, for 13 years, taxpayer funding from the MRC went to Ferguson and his team, and all it produced was code that violated one of the most fundamental precepts of good software development, which is intelligibility. Okay, so 60 Minutes was pimping for the People's Republic of China last night. I don't think we're really surprised about that. Are we? According to Kylie Zempel at the Federalist, CBS News' 60 Minutes lied about claims from Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, playing a partial clip from ABC's This Week and saying he attempted to resurrect a debunked theory that the virus was man-made in Japan. CBS cut the ABC interview before Pompeo's immediate on-air clarification. How about that? Selective editing of videos. I mean, that's not a surprise, is it? And Emerald Robinson has fun with this. Scott Pelley says the White House moved the focus to the Chinese government regarding the virus and who was to blame. Really? CBS News isn't sure the Chinese Communist Party is to blame for the spread of the virus? Really? Pelley calls the Wuhan Virology Lab internationally respected. He fails to mention that his safety protocols were so bad, U.S. officials warned of risky studies with bats and coronavirus 2 years ago. He also fails to mention Wuhan Lab is a level 4 bioweapons facility. Pelley fails to ask any scientists if they're doing gain-of-function research. Pelley fails to say that virologists wanted to stop NIH from funding lab-made viruses because they were too dangerous. In short, Scott Pelley didn't do his homework. Oh, and German intelligence reports. Reports on January 21st, Xi Jinping asked World Health Organization Chief Tedros to hold back information about a human-to-human transmission and to delay a pandemic warning, according to Der Spiegel. I was talking about California pension CalPERS, and I apologize. I should have unearthed this at the time, but CalPERS top money man is swept up in Chinese espionage fears. This is from Bloomberg. They're very upset about this. And this fellow, his name is Ben Meng, or Yu Ben Meng. People have thought there were two people, because sometimes he's called Yu Meng and sometimes he's called Ben Meng. Suddenly Meng, a U.S. citizen who'd grown up in China, had been swept up in the debate over immigration, national security, and the politics of who gets to be a real American. Yeah. So that this fellow had been defamed, had he? According to Tobias Honhut at National Review, The CEO of California's public pension fund said, Representative Jim Banks had made baseless accusations about the fund's chief investment officer being involved in Chinese espionage. But he did not deny that Yu Ben Meng had been recruited to the 1,000 Talents program. That's, yeah, you overseas Chinese, you're working for us, and us being the People's Republic of China. That's what the 1,000 Talents program is. Marcy Frost, the head of California Public Employees Retirement System, CalPERS, also admitted that her organization, the largest public pension fund in the country with approximately $400 billion in global assets, had increased its Chinese investments in 2019 after shifts in well-established indexes. Meng emigrated to the U.S. from China to study at UCal Davis. He initially worked for CalPERS in 2008 before returning in January 2019 as CIO. From 2015 to 2018, Meng, I suppose that's pronounced Meng, worked as deputy CIO with China's State Administration of Foreign Exchange, which oversees China's U.S. Treasury security holdings. But we're all the same under the skin, right? The fact that this fellow was from China, the fact that he worked for the Chinese government relatively recently, well, that's, why would that stand in the way of him being in charge of $400 billion of California pension funds? Only a racist would claim otherwise. You see, it's all about racism. I mean, sure, lots of people have died, and although there's clearly dispute about the numbers, but racism is the big problem. Number of deaths in Canada, just under 5,000. And again, Canada's population of 38 million. Saskatchewan holding steady at 6. Manitoba still ahead at 7. Saskatchewan has 1.1 million people. Manitoba, I believe, has 1.4 million people. British Columbia, which has 5.1 million people, is at 130 deaths. Yeah, okay, one more death than that, actually. Okay, and again, I just want to repeat, 82% of Canada's COVID-19 deaths have been in long-term care, new data reveals. And there's a rather appalling piece in the Globe and Mail. The author called me out for what I had to say about it. Because it's an attempt to rehabilitate the workers at these facilities, which I find really appalling. Then I suspect that there are, shall we say, demographic reasons for this. Yeah, they fled. The author's name is Tu Phan Ha, Vietnamese name. There's been so many terrible stories from Quebec that it has numbed us to the scale of the crisis. 84 deaths at the Saint Dorothe long-term care home, 78 deaths at CHSLD, Laurendau, and the terrible things health workers had to witness. And my response was, did they witness them as they were fleeing in terror from their patients? Doug Ford, the Premier of Ontario, which has one of the most draconian lockdown regimes in Canada, yes, he visited his own home on the weekend, contrary to Ontario's COVID-19 rules. Yes, and Justin Trudeau has violated the rules himself, but of course there's different rules for different people. Trudeau, who seems to be reveling in the lockdown, said one jurisdiction's misstep could see COVID-19 efforts go up in smoke. And he's previously talked about waiting for a vaccine, and there's never been a coronavirus vaccine. And, when is that going to be? Maybe never. Maybe never. I want to talk about my final story now, and it's about Chrissy Teigen. Now, I'm sure a lot of you don't know who Chrissy Teigen is. She is described thus on Wikipedia. She is born in 1985. She is an American model, television personality, and author who made her modeling debut in the annual Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue in 2010 and later appeared on the 50th anniversary cover alongside Nina Agdal and Lily Aldridge. She also co-hosted Lip Sync Battle with LL Cool J from 2015 to 2019. LL Cool J, eh? There's a blast from the past. Her mother is Thai and her father is of Norwegian descent. So she first appeared on the cover of Maxim, and she has done many campaigns and appeared on celebrity-type shows. And now it appears, oh yes, she donated to Planned Parenthood. She's a supporter of immigrants' rights. She's a vocal critic of President Donald Trump. In June 2018, she made a $72,000 donation to the ACLU to commemorate Trump's 72nd birthday. She married a singer John Legend in 2013 in Como, Italy. They have two children, a daughter, Luna, born in 2016, and a son, Miles, born in 2018. Both children were conceived via in vitro fertilization. She has spoken openly about her battle with postpartum depression. So she was a model of some note, but now she is famous for being married to John Legend, who was a very big deal a decade ago, is still popular, but nowhere near as popular as he was a decade ago. Essentially, she is a professional wife, much like Michelle Obama. And so she got into this dispute. Chrissy is, let's see, according to the Daily Mail, she's announced she's going to take a little break from social media after feud with food writer Alison Roman. She set her Twitter account to protect it on Sunday as the fallout from her kerfuffle with Roman continued. I should mention that Chrissy Teigen is, to me, rather odd-looking, although certainly when she was on the cover of Sports Illustrated, she had a very attractive body. She has gained considerable amount of weight, I would say 20 to 30 pounds, such that one can hardly see her eyes anymore. And of course, she's fighting for body positivity and has all these supporters. She's just as sexy now as she was then. No, she isn't, but we all have to pretend. We're all going to be bullied into pretending that she is, because, you know, fit and hot at any rate, at any weight, right? We're being gaslit with this. I mean, nobody believes it. Nobody believes it. But so she got into this dispute because this woman, Alison Roman, said that she didn't want to, she didn't want to end up like Chrissy Teigen, who puts her name to everything. And she mentioned that Japanese woman who tells you what you should keep. Oh no, she's come up with a process for what you should keep and what you should throw away. And it is very elaborate and Japanese. And this woman has managed to make herself a brand because of this. It's all a mystery to me, you know. That I suppose, you know, people in the West have a big problem with owning too much stuff, and I suppose it would just be too easy just to throw stuff away, you know. But if you have some Japanese expert who tells you what you should throw away and why, and you bring in, it becomes spiritual somehow. Yeah. What to keep and what to throw away becomes a spiritual thing. But Chrissy has been known for bullying people on Twitter herself. For instance, Courtney Stodden, who's that unfortunate woman who, when she was, 16 years old, she married some guy in his 50s or whatever, and he had her done over, like from top to bottom, everything. But such was the backlash against Roman that she has apologized. She said, I don't think I've ever been so bummed out by the words of a fellow food lover. I just had no idea I was perceived that way, by her especially, and Marie too. Marie is awesome. It's been crappy to deal with this all day, but I could not say something. I know the actual tears I put into the work I do, and it's really hard to see someone try to completely invalidate it. Someone I really liked. She has a chef. Chrissy Teigen has a cookbook. It's called Cravings, and it's recipes for all the food you want to eat, as opposed to all the food that you don't want to eat. I'm fed up with this. Okay, apparently, anyone is a chef. Everyone is a chef. Everyone is a couturier, and everyone is a parfumier. You need to know an awful lot to be good at cooking, to be good at designing and making clothing, and designing perfumes. But no, Chrissy Teigen apparently, and this horrible woman from Britain, this Hindu woman, Jamila, apparently she was fat when she was a teenager. So she's going to be harping on this. She's always harping on against racism and sexism, and all the intersectionality. And she thundered to Chrissy Teigen's side, saying, "Oh yeah, you mentioned you're picking on a Asian." Okay, well, she's half Asian. It's funny that you didn't pick on Jamie Oliver, or and name two other chefs and Martha Stewart, because Marco Pierre White was another one, and that shouty guy, the guy from England, Gordon Ramsay, or he may be from Scotland. Fun fact. When I was in London in 1976, I sort of had a bucket list, and I wanted to eat at a Michelin-starred restaurant. So there was a restaurant with one Michelin star in Chelsea called Le Gavroche, and I ate there, and I don't remember anything about it, but I'm sure it was delicious. And one of the cooks there at the time was Jamie Oliver. That is to say, not Jamie Oliver, Gordon Ramsay, he rose through the ranks over many years. But again, it's nice to see Chrissy slapped down because, again, she's just a professional wife. And she just posts endless pictures of her at home with her kids. And, of course, here are my opinions about Donald Trump, who I really don't like. And I don't know, we may have reached peak Instagram influencer. I certainly hope so. One last look at the chat, and I am done for the day. Or as the lawyer on Silicon Valley would say, dunzo. Okay, let's scroll down. Manfred von Thistlebaum says, I can cook water with the rest of them. I remember there's this Scottish fellow, his name Peary, used to write for The Spectator. And he published, books on cooking. And he said that, when you're learning to cook, you're going to need a dog with you. And everyone was thinking, well, the reason think dog, why would you need a dog? And he left it near the end. The reason that you need a dog with you when you're learning to cook is because you're going to be throwing away so much of what you've made. But the dog will appreciate it. I mean, it is, we hear so much about expertise. Oh, and expertise is so valuable, and experts are being undervalued. Well, do we really believe in expertise if, as I say, everyone can be a chef, everyone can be a couturier, everyone can be a parfumier? No, apparently we don't believe in it. Lecomte de Brea says there are two types of mothers, one that's happy taking care of her kids, and the other, it's a full-time job, hero mothers. Yeah, I'm reminded of what Bill Burr, he has a routine on this. Just the horror of being a mother. And he says, yeah, okay. And a lot of these women who are complaining are stay-at-home mothers. And let's say they have, famous rich husbands. And he said, you're down on the floor with your kids playing with Legos. Yeah, you can see just how hard, exhausting a job that is. Driss Dudu says, cooking is a basic skill. It is a basic skill. There's no question about that. But if you are trying to get people to put up good money for your books, then you have to be better. You have to be better than the rest. You know, Julia Child became famous. She had numerous TV series, and she sold an awful lot of books. Julia Child was, you know, she was taught in Paris by the best. And again, she had a long apprenticeship. You know, there was no question that she was the top rank of what she did. And I was fed up with celebrities before they decided to colonize every aspect of human life. But what, Julia Child was an OSS spy? Oh, my admiration for her just increased. Eternal Fisherman says Putin's grandfather was Lenin's cook. Choco King 666 says, who remembers Howard Johnson restaurants? I really liked them. When I traveled in the United States, of course, you'd see them over and over again. I don't know that I ever went in one. Of course, there's an episode of Mad Men which goes into really long detail about, you know, the Howard Johnson restaurants and what they were going for there. One Michelin star. There are very few. Ask Jonathan Paul. Michelin stars are not given out promiscuously. There are very few restaurants in the world that even have one Michelin star. I think at the time that I was in London, I think there was only one restaurant in London that had a Michelin star. True parfumiers live on the bridge, like that Patrick Susskind novel, says Coachalango. I see that novel was called Unfilmable, but then it was filmed, wasn't it, by the German director that did Run, Lola, Run? And also, what was it called? Event Horizon or whatever? And again, the joke in Silicon Valley was that this woman at a computer trade show had invited one of the programmers from Pied Piper to watch this movie, and they all said, yeah, she definitely wants to bone you. Why do you say that? Because there's no one alive who's managed to get through more than 10 minutes of that. Tom Ticker or Twicker, something like that, I believe that's his name. Well, that's it for today. Thank you to all who have tuned in. I will be on the air again tomorrow at 4 p.m. Pacific time, 7 p.m. Eastern. If you like the show or any part of it, I'd appreciate it if you'd click on the like button and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you haven't already. If you would like to support the show, my PayPal address is kevin_grace@hotmail.com. Thanks again, and I will leave you with my traditional benediction and farewell in these days of total social atomization. I do dearly hope that you all manage to find some form of genuine human connection. Thanks again. Good night.